Hello, everyone, and welcome to Identifying Staff Needs and Providing Effective In-House Training. My name is Janet Levings, and I work for the American Institutes for Research. I've been involved in after school for about 14 years in the area of coaching, also training and consulting. AIR's mission is to generate and use rigorous evidence that contributes to a better, more equitable world. I work in the youth development and supportive learning environments area, and our vision is to support the AIR mission with a focus on the positive development of young people in schools and in out-of-school time settings in partnership with families, schools, and communities. With funding from the C.S. Mott Foundation, AIR supports the 50-state after-school network as part of the After School Technical Assistance Collaborative in the areas of resource development, content expertise, training and speaking engagements, and technical support. Before we begin, I need you to download one tool, tool number 63, Youth Development Checklist. Tool number 24, the staff training survey, will be referred to, but we will not be reviewing it today. You can download it at your leisure. And the character backstory and character interview templates we will be referring to, but I will have them on my screen. So for today, I need you to download and print out, if possible, tool number 63, the Youth Development Checklist. If you can't print it out, that's okay, but please download it. So please press pause, and when you're ready to go, press play. Welcome back. All right, our agenda for today includes looking at intended outcomes for youth, traits of well-rounded staff. We're going to be looking at youth development. What is it? And what are the principles and practices of youth development? And what does that look like in after school? We're going to look at ways to identify staff needs, paths to in-house staff development, and finally, we're going to be looking at an in-house training protocol, and I am going to provide you with a few examples of what that would look like. In action. So outcomes for youth. Why do we want to start with identifying outcomes for our youth? Before identifying staff developmental needs, we need to identify what outcomes we want for our youth. Then we can identify what qualities we should look for from our staff, along with program practices to support those outcomes. Desired outcomes for all youth include participate and succeed in education at least until the age of 18, take part in activities that contribute to their resilience and the social and emotional skills they need for life, be emotionally and physically healthy and able to cope with the demands of adolescence and becoming an adult, be ready to enter the workforce or continuing education, and ultimately make a real contribution to society. Outcomes for youth and after school. Strong after-school programs develop young people's ability to develop independent thinking and focuses on the needs and interests of the complete young person. After school's main agenda is to support and develop young people towards the future of their choosing. Learning opportunities in after school are numerous. They include academic, social and emotional learning, which includes self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. 21st century skills, which includes global awareness, civic literacy, and career skills. Soft skills, which include positive attitude, team player, and problem solver. And workforce skills, which can include interpersonal skills, technology skills, and critical thinking. We want an engaging and motivating staff that can provide a diverse source of after-school opportunities that supports growth and positive outcomes for our youth. So what qualities do we need from our frontline staff to engage youth in these numerous learning opportunities and achieve these positive outcomes? So let's look at some traits of well-rounded staff. Keeping in mind the types of outcomes that we want for our youth and after school, What qualities would you like to see in your staff? What are your must-have traits or skills for your staff? I've done a little research, and on the next slide, I've will present you with some things that I found, but I would like you to think about your program and what are your must-have traits or skills for your staff. So I'd like you to take a few minutes here. If you are with a peer, I'd like you to turn and talk about your must-have traits. And if you're by yourself, I'd like you to write down 3 to 5 essential traits that you would like to see in your staff. So please press pause. And when you're finished with this task, please press play. Welcome back. Were any of these on your list? Good interpersonal and communication skills, the ability to relate to young people, the ability to work independently, a non-judgmental attitude, perhaps good planning and organizational skills, and perhaps initiative and leadership qualities. There are no right or wrong answers, but you may have some of these on your list, and you may have some others that are very essential for you with regards to your program. We also want our frontline staff to empower, inspire, motivate, excite, encourage, and energize our youth. So how do frontline staff connect to, engage, and support our youth? A key way that they can do this is through using positive youth development practices, which support all learning and intended outcomes. But what is positive youth development, and what does that look like in after school? Before we dive into the principles and practices, what is youth development? Youth development is a theory, a natural process of human development, and an intended outcome. Many fields of practice have embraced youth development as a theory that is anchored in the principle that every young person has the potential for successful, healthy development, and that all youth possess the capacity for positive development. On the following slide, the figure created by the Weikart Center for Youth Program Quality at the Forum for Youth Investment is an example of a recognized approach to youth development that supports quality in after school and expanded learning programs. The pyramid shows how elements of quality programs build on each other to lead to youth engagement. So let's take a look. At the base of our pyramid, which is the foundation of our pyramid, is a safe environment. Environments need to be safe physically as well as psychologically. Once that has been established, we can move up the pyramid to a supportive environment. This includes welcoming our youth and encouraging our youth. From there, we can move up to interaction. This includes peer-to-peer interaction, as well as adult-to-youth interaction. When you have these rich relationships, this is where youth can really feel like they belong to the program. And finally, we get to the top of the pyramid where we have youth engagement, where youth are planning, they're making choices, and they're also doing some reflection on perhaps their activities and how they're feeling and acting and moving through the program. When youth workers develop a safe, welcoming, and supportive space, meaningful interaction with adults and peers can take place. Youth have the opportunity to fully engage and grow from the experience. So what principles and practices support youth development? Here's where our youth development checklist tool number 63 comes into play. This tool provides you with program-wide principles and practices that support youth development in 5 different areas. The assessment can be used by individuals or by lead staff to assess how an entire program is incorporating youth development practices. So this checklist has wide-ranging principles and practices that support youth development, such as emergency and contact information is available for all youth, and activities reflect the local context and culture of the participants. But for today's purposes, we are going to be focusing on the principles or practices that are essential for staff. So again, they're wide ranging. All of these principles and practices support youth development and they support the program. But today, we're really going to be focusing on the principles and practices that are essential for your staff. So here's what the checklist looks like. And our first area is warm and welcoming environment. And below it are principles and practices that support a warm and welcoming environment. And then we have 3 columns, yes, in process, and no. And this is where if a staff member was doing a self-assessment, they would think about, am I implementing this principle or practice? Am I doing it with fidelity? Do I know how to do it? Then yes. In process, perhaps I know I should be doing it. I'm doing it some of the time. I'm not quite sure if I'm doing it correctly. That's in process. Or, I'm really not doing this. I need to learn more about this. And that answer would be no. And program leadership can use this checklist not only to help guide and programming and what their program can look like to support youth development, but to assess how the program is doing. So program leadership can use it in a similar way. They can review programming over the course of a couple of days and think about their staff as a whole. Do they seem to understand the principle or practice? Are they implementing it with fidelity and consistently? And yes, are some of them implementing it or some of them not quite sure what to do? Or are they not quite doing it in the way that you had intended them to be incorporating that principle or practice? Then it's in process. And of course, if most of the staff are not utilizing that principle or practice or aren't utilizing it in the way that it is or was intended, then that would be a no. The sections include a warm and welcoming environment, support for positive behavior, supportive relationships and opportunities to belong, opportunities for youth choice, decision-making, leadership, and reflection, and opportunities for learning and skill development. Again, what we're going to be doing today is reviewing the youth development checklist with an eye towards essential traits or essential principles, and practices that you feel are essential for frontline staff. So I'd like you to consider staff to youth relationships and how staff are implementing programming. So I'd like you to take a good 8 to 10 minutes here to review the checklist. If you've been able to print it out, you can make a check mark or circle the principles or practices that you feel are essential for your staff. If you have it on your computer, you can just jot down 3 to 5 of the top principles or practices that you would like to see your staff engage in. If you're with a peer, you can turn and talk about your choices. So I would ask you to press pause, take some time with the checklist, complete the task, and when you're ready to move forward, press play. Welcome back. So I hope that you found that the youth development checklist was informative and helpful, and that it can help you to guide programming or think about how you're going to set up your program or how relationships between staff and youth might look like. So let's see about your list. What did you come up with? These are some things that I came up with regards to some essential traits I would like to see from my staff, and they include engage with youth and consistently call each person by name. Staff members respond to youth with respect, acceptance, and appreciation. Staff members regularly offer sincere praise with specific comments and feedback for positive behavior. And when conflicts arise, they are minimized and resolved quickly. So this is my list. You may have some of these responses for your list, and you may have some different responses, some different principles and practices that you think would be essential, and that's fine. This was an activity for you to really become familiar with the checklist and to think about the principles and practices that you would like to see your staff develop and use. So assessing staff training needs. With the help of the Youth Development Checklist and a review of their essential traits of well-rounded staff, program leaders can identify key skills they would like to see in their staff and identify the program-wide practices or principles they would like to see implemented. Ideally, this would be for a school year program. This would be done during the summer before staff come for training and arrive. And so you can form a consensus on what skills and practices and principles you would really like to focus on with your staff to have a successful program. Then you would communicate expectations to staff and provide training at the beginning of the year and assess the development of key skills and staff implementation of expected practices and principles ongoing throughout the year. And again, the Youth Development Checklist is one way, it's a tool that can help you assess where the staff are with regards to these key principles and practices. So how else can we gather data to help us decide upon the focus of an in-house training? We can ask our staff. Reaching out verbally or through a staff survey is another way leadership can find out the developmental needs of staff. The staff training survey tool that I referred to can be used to assess the types of training activities your staff are looking for. The survey can be adjusted to include practices or activities that you feel are relevant for your program. Just make sure to download it in the Word format. And once it's in the Word format, you can change the survey in any way that you see fit. You can add to it, adjust it so that it works for your program. Developing staff. After deciding on key staff skills and practices, program leadership can develop trainings for frontline staff. Beginning of the year trainings can focus on key skills and or practices for new hires or for all staff. Ongoing trainings and focus on skills and or practices that have been assessed among all staff and have been identified as needing support or support for activities or practices that have been requested by staff. I did work with an after-school program a couple of years ago where the staff had requested help with behavior management, and I came into their program one evening and I discussed all of the behavior problems that were going on with the youth in the program. We brainstormed strategies. I provided resources for them and some strategies that I brought with me. And then we decided as a group for on a kind of a protocol of how to handle these behavior management issues that they were experiencing. So it was really productive training session, and it took place because staff actually asked for support and help, which was terrific. So what strategies do you currently have to support staff development? Frontline staff workshops provided by your organization are great, but reaching all staff may be difficult as not everyone can attend the trainings. And in addition, organization-wide trainings may be limited or non-existent due to COVID-19. So let's look at various paths to staff development. But before we do that, I want to take a little break and do some neck stretches. You've probably been sitting at your computer for hours. You've been focusing on the screen. Your brain has been trying to absorb all this information. You're probably a little stiff. So let's do some neck rolls, going back and forth. Oh, I don't know if you heard my neck crack there. Side to side, front to back. Apparently, I really needed this. Let's take our arms and do some stretching. If you were engaged in a live training, obviously you'd be walking around, moving from place to place. Possibly you could get up and stretch your legs. But I know that when I'm working on a computer for several hours, I really get kind of stiff. Okay, let's roll our shoulders back. All right, thanks for doing that with me. All right, different ways to develop staff on site include lead staff can model a best practice activity or protocol in a team meeting, or any staff really that's proficient at an activity or a protocol can certainly lead that activity in a team meeting. Experienced staff can mentor new staff. Lead staff can provide scenarios for staff to reflect on and discuss during team meetings. A good example for that again would be some behavior management issues. Lead staff could provide a couple scenarios, and after school staff could work in groups or teams to kind of come up with solutions and strategies and talk about it as a group. And you can include targeted skills or practices on lesson plans. For example, building in time for reflection. If that is something that you wanted to see implemented program-wide, you could actually write that right into your lesson plans. And finally, to create an in-house training. And that is what our focus is today. So in-house trainings, ta-da, here we are. Creating a collaborative atmosphere for in-house training. So how do you create that welcoming, collaborative atmosphere? Provide staff with primer information, start with an icebreaker, build in time for discussion, whole and small group, ask for input, best practices from staff, and then build in time for reflection on the training. So here's an example of an in-house training protocol. We begin with an icebreaker and then provide a topic overview. Why is it important? Why are we talking about this today? How is this a benefit to staff and ultimately the youth that we are serving? How means providing an example of the skill or practice and how to implement it. Then give staff time to practice the skill or practice within the session. Leave room for reflection, time for reflection and questions. And staff uses the skill or practice with youth. And at a later date, regroups for staff discussion of successes and challenges. And of course, if staff are experiencing some challenges, they can also approach program leadership in the interim. And they can share their successes informally as well. Why icebreakers? Icebreakers get people up and moving. They get people to know one another. They learn something new about peers and established groups. They get people to feel more comfortable to interact with the group. They create a team atmosphere and to have some fun. So here's an icebreaker for you called Who's in the Room? There are indicators on the left. There are places for names on the right. This document would be created before the training session, handed out to the staff, and they circulate through the room, and they look for people that fit those indicators. Who traveled outside the country? Who has been in their position for more than 3 years? Who enjoys the same type of food as I do? You can certainly change up those indicators or questions. If you have an established group, you can make them a little bit more difficult or really have some fun with those questions. Here's one of my favorite icebreakers. It can also be used as a team building exercise, paper tower activity, 7 pieces of paper in 7 minutes. For this activity, you would separate your group into teams of anywhere from 2 to 4 to 5 people. You would provide them with 3 minutes to plan without manipulating the paper, really just talking about it. And then they have 7 minutes to build the tallest tower they can with 7 pieces of paper. Participants may rip the paper, but may not use any tools to support the tower. For instance, they may not use tape or paper clips or gum. I've actually seen people use chewing gum to try to stick pieces of paper together, and that is a no-no, not acceptable. They get points for originality, though. Every group member must contribute to the tower, and if the tower falls, start over. And the tallest tower standing at the end of 7 minutes wins. Then reflect on accomplishments and lessons learned. And I created my own tower yesterday. I'm going to show you a picture of it. Here it is, my orange tower. And after I created this tower, took a picture and loaded it up to my computer, I realized that my tower looks like a transformer. My apologies. I don't know quite how that happened, but there you have it. So I did follow the rules though. I did manipulate the paper. I tore the paper. I didn't use any paper clips or any other apparatus or apparati to connect the paper together. And that's what I came up with. There are some different ways that you can approach this activity. If you have an established group and you would like to make it a little bit more challenging, or they've done this before, you can ask them to create this tower non-verbally, so they may not speak. Or you can tell your group that this tower is going to be constructed in San Francisco, and at the end of 7 minutes, you are going to walk by and gently shake every table. So not only do they have to consider the height of the tower, but they want to create a strong base of their tower. Those towers typically end up looking like Stonehenge. So it's a lot of fun. An icebreaker is suitable for online sessions. So I decided that you may have some online training that perhaps you need to facilitate. This one's called Time Travel. You can ask participants, if you could go back in time and talk with a historical figure, who would it be and why? Participants can be given a few minutes to think about the question, or you can send it out before the session and respond in the chat box. You can also ask them to provide the question that they may ask that historical figure. Another icebreaker suitable for online sessions is the deserted island. You can ask participants, if you were stuck on a deserted island and you were only allowed to bring 3 items, what would they be? Participants, again, can be given a few minutes, or you can send it out before the session and respond in the chat box. Those responses are typically really interesting and kind of telling, and they're really fun. So after you have facilitated your icebreaker, then it's time to move forward. But before we can do that, we're going to pick a practice of focus. So what are we training today? What is our practice of focus? What are we going to be doing? So I provided a sample of principles and practices from the Youth Development Checklist. And I've highlighted one, provide opportunities for youth choice within activities. So this is our practice of focus for our training session. So then we need to provide a skill or practice overview. Why is this important? Why is this beneficial for staff and ultimately for the youth that we are serving? Effective after-school programs allow youth to have a choice in helping to determine what types of activities are offered, selecting what to participate in, and when possible, what to do within an activity. When offered a choice, youth are more apt to be invested in the program or activity. And they also typically tend to have more fun. It minimizes behavior issues, and ultimately staff can really get engaged with youth on a really fun level. When youth are engaged and staff are engaged, it just makes for a much more enjoyable experience. So now how? We need to provide an example. So again, the practice is to integrate authentic choice into an activity. The activity is students are asked to share information about a book they read or that they're reading from the day school. And I provided several examples and several choices for youth that they can choose from. Youth may illustrate a scene from the story, interview a character, pick a piece of music and talk about why it connects to a character, create a backstory for a character, or compare the book to another book that has a similar theme. So those are several choices that youth can choose from. So if I was working with you live, I would actually have you work through a couple of these activities. And here I'm providing you with the template, the character interview template. There's room for the interviewer name, the story, the character. The location of the interview. Why is that important? Well, I was working with a group of after school practitioners, and they were actually interviewing fairy tale characters. And someone was interviewing Cinderella. And it really makes a difference whether you're interviewing her um, as she's entering the ball or leaving the ball or cleaning out ashes from the fireplace. So it's helpful to have that location indicated. And in their case, as she was entering the ball, they envisioned it as if she was walking into the Oscars, and they asked her, who did your hair? Who made your dress? Whose shoes are you wearing? Where did you get that jewelry? So, um, in addition, they asked her more probing questions like, what do you hope to achieve? Who are you? Where did you come from? Do you think that you'll be accepted? Nobody here really knows you. Um, what's the outcome you are hoping for? And then they tried to interview her on the way out. And of course, as we know, she was in a little bit of a hurry, and that didn't work out so well. And it was actually fairly funny. Then the next template I provided for you is the character backstory, provides a space for the story title and the character. And then I have some prompts for the character's backstory to consider the significant events in the character's past, family life or structure, their comfort or discomfort of living, the location they grew up in, etc. So many authors include backstories of their characters. They provide information on um, how they came to be the way they are. And some other stories and other characters do not have a backstory. And in these situations, it gives the youth an opportunity to make one up. So if they're reading a story where there really isn't an established backstory about a character who is really greedy or maybe manipulative or really kind and thoughtful, maybe not too nice, the youth can really think about, I'm going to make up a backstory that explains how that character got to be that way. And it's fairly interesting what youth can come up with. Then staff need to practice integrating choice into the activity. So for this in-house training, I would have asked staff to bring an activity or lesson plan into the training with them, one that they were going to be implementing in the near future. I would have staff work in teams to provide youth with 3 authentic choices for the activity that they chose. They can work on one activity or maybe another one if they had time. So I like to have staff work in teams in training because frequently they don't get to do so when they're working with youth, and this is an opportunity for them to work together and put their heads together and come up with some fun and engaging ideas. Then teams share their activities and choices with the whole group. Then leave some time for reflection and questions. Staff uses the skill or practice with youth out in the program. And then at a later time, regroup for staff discussion of successes and challenges, or of course, the staff can speak with program leadership if they need some support. So another practice from the youth development checklist that we are going to be going through is youth participate in setting program or activity rules. So what would an in-house training with this practice of focus look like? So you as a facilitator would choose a icebreaker, and then we would need to provide the practice overview. Why is this practice important? Why is it helpful? Why does it support staff and ultimately the youth that we're serving? Developing clear rules and guidelines at the beginning of the program with input from youth creates an environment characterized by inclusiveness where young people feel a sense of community. Also, when youth contribute to program rules, we see reduced instances of problems because the rules are viewed as relevant program guidelines in large part because the youth were co-authors of those rules or guidelines. Then we provide an example. So here's my example. I envisioned that I was working with an after-school dance group. This was the beginning of an 8-week session, and I decided that I wanted to establish some rules together with the after-school dance group. So typically you would do it on the first day, the first session of your 8-week session. And you would, I put both hopes and goals and rules on one poster board. Typically, I would have two big pieces of chart paper, one for hopes and goals and one for rules, and Post-its. So you would ask youth, what are your hopes and goals for this after school dance group? What do you hope to achieve? What do you hope to happen throughout the course of the next 8 weeks, perhaps by the end of the 8-week program? And have youth write down their hopes and goals on Post-its. You can decide, do they get 2, do they get 3, is it open-ended? It's really up to you. How many Post-its do you want to wrangle in a little bit? It can get a little unruly. The hopes and goals chart paper does not look this neat at first, but that's okay. So once you've let the youth think about and post their hopes and goals or the outcomes they're hoping to achieve, then you as a facilitator would walk up to the paper and take a little bit of time to group like-minded responses together. So perhaps all of these students right here wanted to compete with the after-school dance group. These wanted to improve their dance skills. These wanted to socialize with their peers. These wanted to exercise. So whatever their hopes and goals are, you would just really, again, look for those like-minded responses and group them together. This is actually called kiting the Post-its because this is like a tail of a kite. So the more Post-its that are placed together, of course, it's at a glance, you can see that quite a few, most of the students here, or a larger percentage of the students, wanted to socialize in this after-school dance group. So you can see which of those hopes and goals or the achievements really stood out and were significant. Then from there, you can move on to rules and do the same thing. So if we want to compete, if we want to improve our skills, if we want to exercise, if we want to get some socialization in there, what are the rules that we need to follow in order to have a successful after-school dance group? So they would write their thoughtful rules on Post-its and they would put them on the chart paper. You as a facilitator would group like-minded responses together. And on this kited group, I have contribute, and here I had safe space. And then you would write down the rules that they came up with and that you agreed upon. A safe space, no bullying and name calling, all ideas are respected, and do your part and contribute. I included this because perhaps if they wanted to compete, they would really want everybody to do their best and contribute in that competition. As a facilitator, you of course can include some non-negotiable rules that you might have for your program. In addition, you wouldn't want to have 10 or 13 rules. That gets to be a little unruly. Sorry for the pun. Then, and also make sure that the rules are clear and that they're really intended for everybody. So that's our example of how to create group rules. And for this, it's the after-school dance group. Then in our in-house training, I would split the staff into 2 groups and have them practice running a session where youth are asked to contribute to the rules. Make sure to have the needed supplies on hand. You might ask for staff for 2 volunteers to be the facilitators, and then they would run through a little mini session. And in doing so, they would become familiar with this practice and kind of have seen it once from you, the facilitator, and then be engaged in it. So by the time that they're actually implementing this practice with their youth, they have a degree of comfort with it. Then you would leave time for reflection and questions, and staff use this skill or practice with youth out in the program, and then regroup for staff discussion of successes and challenges. And of course, those rules or guidelines can be adjusted over time if necessary. And you would talk to the group about it, of course. All right, so effective in-house training, I would like you, we're almost at the end of our session today, and I would like you to think about an in-house training that you would like to develop. Perhaps from the youth development checklist, some things popped up that you thought, that would be great to implement in our program, or something else that you would like to see an improvement on, or you would like to incorporate into your program, a skill or a practice or a policy or a principle, anything that you think that when you go back to programming that you would like to focus on and create an in-house training for. So if you're with a peer, turn and talk about a training you would like to develop. And if you're alone, please write down a few areas of practice or some skills you would like to focus on. Please press pause. And when you are finished, press play. Welcome back. I hope that you came up with a few ideas for an in-house training that you would like to develop and implement back in your program. One more step I would take if we were in a live training situation, which I'd like to share with you, is I would ask the staff at the training to work together to come up with a training or two, just as I asked you to do, but then to actually write out the steps, to plan it out. What would be the icebreaker they would use? What is the practice or skill overview? Why is it important? What's the example that you would use? And then how would you have the staff practice? And then, of course, reflection and so on. So I think it's really helpful for several reasons, because it helps staff to really think about the process again, and also to actually create a training before they walk out of this training. So they're going to have a training in hand that they can actually implement. So if I was training the trainer, so to speak, they would walk out with a training that they developed, perhaps one or two, and then they would share out with their peers and get some great, rich ideas from each other, which is always helpful because you are really wonderful resources for each other. So we're just about finished. Our lessons learned here. We identified intended outcomes for youth. We reviewed traits of well-rounded staff. We reviewed youth development as far as what is it, what are the principles and practices that support youth development. And we also reviewed that youth development checklist. We reviewed ways to identify staff needs. We've identified several different paths to staff development. And finally, we reviewed an in-house training protocol with examples. So I hope that you found that the youth development checklist was really helpful, and it's something that can help you going forward, either to guide and or assess programming and staff. And I hope that you found the in-house training protocol helpful. Of course, you can take it and adjust it to fit your training style and fit your needs. Before I sign off, I would like to say thank you. Thank you for all of the work that you are doing with youth in your community, especially in these stressful times and with COVID-19, and there's a lot of uncertainty. Your role has always been super important, and it is even more important now with what's going on in the United States and in the schools and after school. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for being a really key worker, a key person in youth's lives. And I would like to wish you all the best as you move forward and move back into programming in whatever capacity you're going to be doing so. Thank you.